Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever ignored a small problem because everything seemed to be going well? Maybe your business was growing, customers were buying, cash was coming in, your team was busy. From the outside, everything looked healthy. So you assumed tomorrow would look a lot like today. That's exactly how many businesses get into trouble. Not because they are failing, but because they are actually succeeding. Today, we are performing a financial autopsy on one of the most famous business failures in modern history, Blockbuster. At its peak, Blockbuster had more than 9,000 stores around the world, millions of customers, thousands of employees, a globally recognized brand indeed. They had strong revenue, powerful supplier relationships. If you wanted to rent a movie, you went to Blockbuster. It seemed untouchable, yet a few years later, it filed for bankruptcy. Now, how does that even happen? Let's examine the patient. So Blockbuster didn't become successful by accident. It solved a real customer problem. It made movies rental convenient, right? Its stores became part of family routines. Friday night often meant a trip to Blockbuster. Parents picked the movie while the children picked the snacks. It wasn't simply a retailer. It became part of popular culture. And financially, the company looked impressive. Steady revenue they had, they also had strong brand recognition, national scale, profitable operations. Most business owners would have looked at Blockbuster and said, that's exactly what success really looks like, But success has a dangerous side to it. Sometimes success becomes the reason business stop questioning themselves. Every financial autopsy begins with symptoms. The challenge is that symptoms rarely look dangerous in the beginning. For Blockbuster, the first symptom wasn't failing revenue, or I'll say it wasn't declining revenue if I put it that way. It was something much harder to detect, which was complacency. The company had built a business model that generated reliable income from physical stores and late fees, right? The model worked until customer expectations started changing. Customers wanted convenience, they wanted movies without driving, they wanted fewer penalties, they wanted entertainment on demand. The market itself was changing. But Blockbuster's financial engine was still optimized for yesterday. Now, let me analyze how this progressed in 5 stages, right? Now, the first stage I'll call is the business model becomes comfortable. When a company has a profitable formula, every decision naturally protects that formula. That's human nature, really. But the danger there is that protecting today's cash flow can prevent tomorrow's growth. Imagine owning a restaurant that is always full. Would you feel urgency to invest in online ordering? Probably not until customer behavior changes on you. The second stage, cash was protecting the past. And this is where treasury thinking becomes very important, right? Because every dollar a business generates has competing demands. Some dollars protect current operations, some prepare the business rather for the future. The question is, how much cash are you allocating for tomorrow? This right here is very critical. As digital technology emerged, investing heavily in new platforms, meant spending money today without seeing immediate returns, right? That's really difficult, especially when the current model still, appears profitable for the business. Many businesses make this same mistake, right? They delay investing in the future because the present still feels very comfortable for them. The third stage is what I would like to call customer behavior changes faster than internal decision. Customers rarely announce that they are leaving. They simply begin choosing differently, right? First a few, then thousands, and then millions of customers, right? Streaming became easier for customers. Home delivery became more attractive for them as well. Technology improved. Convenience won eventually, right? Now, the business didn't collapse overnight. Customers' behavior evolved gradually, right? So unfortunately, the company's response was slower than the market's expectations, right? Now, the fourth stage is what I like to call revenue becomes less predictable. As customers shifted away, revenue became increasingly pressured. Store costs remained, employees remained, lease commitments remained. Operating expenses didn't disappear simply because customers changed their habits, right? Imagine your business, for example, generates $500,000 every month. Your fixed expenses total, say, $420,000, right? If customers' demand declines by just 20%, it means that your monthly revenue falls to $400,000. Without reducing your costs or creating new revenue or income streams, you are now losing money every month, right? You're losing $20,000 every month. The business doesn't collapse immediately, but every month, business becomes more difficult than the last. The fifth and final stage is what I like to call strategic flexibility disappears. The longer adaptation is delayed for businesses, the fewer options remain. Eventually, every decision becomes reactive instead of being proactive. Cash that could have funded innovation is now protecting survival. Management is no longer asking, what should we build next? They are then asking you, how do we survive this quarter? By then, the window for transformation has become much smaller. That's why it's critical to act early once you see the symptoms. When Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy, many people thought technology had destroyed the company. But I see it differently, really. Technology created the challenge, that's true. Every disruption creates difficult decisions, that's true. But financial prioritization determined the response, right? The business that survive usually identify those decisions early on, especially when they see the first set of symptoms that we looked at in those stages, right? Business that don't use a financial prioritization strategy, they are often the ones who spend too long protecting yesterday's success. Now, as a certified treasury professional, if I were sitting in Blockbuster's treasury function years earlier, these are the questions I would have been asking right there. How much cash are we investing in future capabilities is the first one, right? Now, the second I'll be asking is, how dependent are we on one business model? If customer behavior changes by 15%, what happens to liquidity? This is the third one I'll be asking. While the fourth one is, how much financial flexibility do we have to reinvent ourselves, right? And the final one I'll ask is, are today's profits creating tomorrow's resilience, or is it just simply making us more comfortable today? Treasury isn't just about preserving cash, but it's also about preserving strategic options for the business. One of the biggest lessons from Blockbuster is that capital allocation is also a strategic decision. Every organization faces a choice. Either you protect the present or you prepare for the future. The strongest organizations, what they do is they learn how to do both in a balanced way, right? And this is what the cash flow prioritization matrix teaches. It teaches that growth isn't simply about spending more money, right? It's about directing limited resources towards initiatives that protect the long-term value of the business. Sometimes the highest return on investment isn't the one producing cash today. It is the one ensuring that the business remains relevant tomorrow. At this point, I want you to ask yourself these very critical questions. What percentage of this year's budget is preparing my business for the future? Now, the next one is, if my customers change their buying habits tomorrow, how quickly would my business adapt? Very critical. The thought I want you to ask is, what assumptions about my industry haven't been challenged in years? Now, let's do one very simple calculation to give you some more context to this, right? So suppose your business generates, say, $2 million annually, right? You decide to, dedicate, say, just 5% annual revenue to innovation and future capability, right? That's $100,000 each year. Now, compare that to waiting until disruption forces you to completely rebuild your business from scratch. Which of the option is more expensive for you, right? I think you can figure it out. So, the cost of preparation or the cost of catching up. For most businesses, the answer becomes obvious. Just unfortunately, sometimes you discover this very, very late. Blockbuster didn't simply lose to a competitor. It lost because customers' expectations changed while its financial priorities remained anchored to a business model that had made it successful previously. That is a lesson that every founder should remember. Today's success can quietly become tomorrow's blind spot. The goal isn't to fear change. The goal is to make sure your cash flow gives you the freedom to respond when change arises or arrives, right? Another question I'd like to ask you is, at what stage do you think Blockbuster could have been saved, right? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment. Before we end today's episode, I want you to ask or answer rather these key questions, right? So before your next budgeting meeting, ask yourself really, what percentage of my budget is invested in keeping the lights on versus preparing for the future of the business? Also ask yourself, if my customers change their buying behavior tomorrow, could my business adapt within 6 months? This is very critical in relative to Blockbuster's case that we just reviewed right here, right? Also ask yourself, which product or service or process are we protecting simply because it always worked in the past for us, right? Ask yourself as well, are today's profits financing tomorrow's competitiveness or merely preserving yesterday's, business model? Now, the final question I need to ask yourself, if I performed a financial autopsy on my own business 5 years from now, would I discover that my biggest mistake was failing to adapt while I still have the cash to do so? Because businesses rarely fail the day disruption arrives. You can say that in bankruptcy, in Blockbuster's case rather. They fail because they repeatedly choose comfort over preparation until they no longer have the financial flexibility to change. Hope you learned some lessons from Blockbuster's case and know that these are just case studies for you to review and learn as educational content, which is just my opinion being expressed from my 13 years of experience in treasury and finance. So these case studies we reviewed today is just for educational purposes so that you get the lessons from bankruptcy cases and you can apply to your business to prevent you from going bankrupt. These are my opinions and just for your education so that your business can continually grow sustainably.